Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a bit of a mind-bending journey to completely rethink reality itself. Seriously, we're diving into a fascinating paper by Dr. Anattā called A Poetic Cosmogenesis. And, if you've ever felt like the textbook version of the universe is just a bit too rigid, a bit too cold and mechanical, you're absolutely going to love this. We're going to see how ancient Eastern wisdom and cutting-edge Western physics are actually pointing to the exact same incredible conclusion about who we are. So let's just get right into it.
It's kind of the ultimate mystery, right? What is the universe actually made of? For the longest time, classical philosophers looked around and figured, well, everything's made of fundamental, unchanging stuff, earth, water, fire, air. Fast forward, and modern science swapped those out for atoms, particles, and quantum fields. But honestly, the underlying assumption really didn't change. The universe is basically a giant box filled with solid things. But what if that assumption is literally 100% wrong?
See, for centuries, the classical mechanistic view, the stuff we all learned in school, treated the universe like a giant clock, a collection of static, solid substances just bumping around. But 20th century physics, Einstein, quantum theory, all of that absolutely blew that wide open. They brought us the process relational view. This is the idea that reality isn't a collection of separate objects at all. It's a dynamic, ongoing process of relational becoming. That solid chair you're sitting on right now, it's not really solid. It's actually a completely emergent expression of energy and relationships. Crazy, right?
Which brings us to Section 1, the Tao of information, from Wuji to bits. To really wrap our heads around this huge shift from static stuff to an ongoing process, we actually need to look backwards, way backwards. We're going to see how ancient Taoist wisdom perfectly maps onto the very bleeding edge of modern information theory.
Okay, let's look at how the ancient Tao Te Ching breaks down the emergence of reality. It starts with Wuji. This is undifferentiated potential. It's not empty nothingness, but more like pure potential just waiting to pop. From there, we move to Taiji, which is the first dynamic unity. Then we hit yin and yang, where we get relational differentiation. Think hot and cold, up and down. That sparks the 5 phases, these transformational processes, which finally result in the 10,000 things. And that's just the ancient Chinese term for the mind-boggling complexity of the entire manifested universe. Notice how existence emerges here step by step, right? From pure potential into massive complexity. It's a continuous sequence of becoming.
And the wild thing is, this perfectly mirrors what the legendary modern physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed decades later. This is the same guy who actually coined the term black hole, by the way. He had this famous, super punchy phrase, it from bit. He was suggesting that every single particle, field, or physical piece of reality actually derives its existence from binary, informational distinctions, bits, zeros and ones, presence and absence, just like yin and yang. Modern physics is literally telling us that, at its absolute core, reality is information.
So you might be wondering, where does that information even come from? Well, Dr. Washra lays out this stunning progression. For a bit of information to exist, there has to be a difference. And for there to be a difference, you need a relationship between two things. It's like a giant set of Russian nesting dolls. Check this out. You start with a relation. That creates a difference. That difference generates information. The organized information expresses itself as energy. And then finally, that energy structures itself into matter. Matter is not the starting point. It's just the final, thickest layer of a deeply relational process. It is a perfect one-to-one mirror of that ancient Taoist sequence we just looked at.
All right, moving into Section 2, the universe creates itself. Because if the universe isn't just a box of dead matter, but this flowing river of information and energy, what is it actually doing? Let's zoom in on how this continuous flow sparks the actual creation of the cosmos.
To get this, we need to borrow a beautiful old Greek word, poiesis. You probably hear the root word for poetry in there, and you'd be right. But originally, poiesis meant bringing forth, or creative emergence. It's the active, live process where potential becomes actual. So when you look up at the night sky at all those stars and galaxies, you're not just looking at objects parked silently in a vacuum. You are witnessing poiesis. You're watching a continuous, highly creative unfolding happening right in front of you, in real time.
So here's the absolute crucial takeaway. Cosmos equals continuous poiesis. The universe is not a finished, done deal project. It didn't just pop into existence billions of years ago and call it a day. It's not just being. It is constantly becoming. Literally every single second, it is bringing forth brand new relationships, new structures, and new complexities.
And as it kept becoming, the universe hit a totally profound evolutionary milestone. It stopped just making inanimate stuff like rocks and gas clouds, and it generated autopoiesis. This is a concept that describes living systems as self-producing networks that actively create and maintain themselves. Think about a single biological cell. It doesn't just sit there like a pebble. It breathes, it repairs damage, it adapts to survive. The universe made this huge leap from just making structures to generating self-maintaining life.
To put that into perspective, before life emerged, the cosmic equation was pretty simple. The universe generates structure. Boom, done. But after life, the universe generates structure plus self-maintenance. The cosmos actually started producing little entities that could respond to their environment, adapt to new challenges, and actively preserve their own boundaries. It was no longer just creating forms, it was creating forms that cared about their own ongoing survival.
Which brings us to section 3, dissolving the independent observer. This is where things get really personal. If the universe is this massive, self-creating, relational process, what is your role in it? What is my role? It's time to completely dissolve the illusion that we are just independent observers.
The paper brings in this brilliant insight from Buddhist philosophy here, the principle of anattā, or non-self. Now don't panic, this doesn't mean you don't exist, not at all. But it does directly challenge the idea that you have this permanent, independent self that just stands safely outside of reality, watching it go by like a movie. We all kind of think of ourselves as tourists visiting the universe, right? Well, Anattā dismantles that. It tells us you are absolutely not separate from the conditions that created you.
Look at the conventional view. It's totally dualistic. You have the observer looking at the observed universe. You're on one side of the glass, the universe is on the other. But the Buddhist reality, which, by the way, perfectly aligns with our cutting-edge physics, it shows that the observer is contained entirely within the cosmos. You aren't the starting point of the experience. You are an emergent process completely wrapped up inside the larger cosmic unfolding. You are literally made of the exact same informational and energetic relationships as a star.
And that brings us to what might be one of the most beautiful quotes in the history of science, from the legendary astronomer Carl Sagan. He perfectly bridged this ancient Buddhist philosophy with modern astrophysics, when he said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." Because you are not separate from the universe. Your ability to see, your ability to think, and your ability to wonder is literally the universe seeing, thinking, and wondering.
I really want that to sink in. That is the ultimate realization here. The universe doesn't just generate matter. It doesn't just generate biology. At the level of human consciousness, the universe finally generates the capacity to observe itself. We aren't aliens dropped onto a random rock in space. We are the cosmos waking up, growing a pair of eyes, and looking back at its own magnificent hands.
Let's wrap this all up in Section 4, a Poetic Cosmogenesis, the Cosmic Symphony. How do we pull all these wild threads together, from Taoist potential to bits of information to self-maintaining biology, all the way to cosmic consciousness? We step back and look at the grand synthesis.
To really visualize this, the paper uses another incredible Buddhist metaphor, Indra's net. Imagine this vast, infinite cosmic web, and at every single intersection of the web, there's a glittering jewel. Because these jewels are perfectly reflective, every single one of them reflects every other jewel in the entire network. This is the perfect analogy for our holographic reality. A single tiny cell contains the DNA blueprint for a whole organism. A single drop of water reflects massive global planetary cycles. And a single human mind contains the traces of total cosmic evolution. Every single thing is intimately, deeply connected to everything else.
Think of the universe as a symphony. When we do that, we realize that no single field of study acts alone. It's a massive collaboration. Physics describes the raw notes being played. Mathematics maps out the underlying rhythmic patterns. Information theory defines the precise structural relationships between the instruments. Autopoetic life expresses this soaring, complex melody. And consciousness? Consciousness is the universe finally growing the ears to hear its own magnificent music. Every single discipline is just describing a different layer of this ongoing, universal composition.
And as that music plays, we arrive at this incredibly grounding truth. There is no dancer separate from the dance. Think about it. The dancer only exists through the act of dancing. You are not a static object placed into a cold, empty universe. You are an ongoing process. You are the continuous becoming. You exist entirely through this cosmic unfolding. You are an active, vital participant in this poetic cosmogenesis.
Which leaves us with this one final, beautiful thought.
If reality isn't just dead matter, but this rich, interconnected web of relationships, if you are not some separate, lonely observer, but literally the universe awakening to itself looking right through your eyes, how will you choose to dance today? Keep that sense of awe with you, and until next time, keep exploring.